This session is going to focus on, we're going to get a lot of regulated perspectives when we start our public hearing. But for now, we're going to hear from somebody who we haven't seen in a couple of years, John Mason from Transport for London, Taxis for Hire. John has been working with Transport for London since 2009. We're happy he's back and joining us. You know, one of the more controversial and difficult issues that have faced transportation officials around the world is what to do about the proliferation of cars and managing them. John was the person who was the head of enforcement for the congestion pricing scheme. It's interesting, his bio talks of it as a scheme. It's actually something that is become a model for other transportation officials who are trying to implement it. As you probably know, in New York City, it was a heavy political lift for the mayor to get that done and get that passed. But instead of the mayor and the transportation commissioner implementing congestion pricing, they've actually just put bicycle lanes and pedestrian plazas everywhere, so you can't really drive a car in New York City anyway. So I suggest that you buy a bike next time you come to New York. But you know, the mayor tried, couldn't get it done. But you know, congestion pricing must have been a real heavy lift, and as a result of his efforts for Transport for London, handling that, as well as I'm sure he was very involved with the preparation for the Olympics. Congratulations on the Olympics, by the way. He's also been involved in bicycles, so he understands multimodal transportation options. He developed the mayor's cycle for hire scheme, which was successfully launched in August 2010. Again, in New York, we're on hold with our ride share. Things, believe it or not, are moving a little bit more slowly in New York on some of these issues. Since he's been in charge of taxi cabs, he's actually done some reforms, including putting age limits on the vehicles, you know, looking to reduce private for hire taxi cab vehicle emissions. So we commend you for that. And welcome back, London, and welcome, and we hope you have a great time here, John, and we look forward to hearing what's been going on in London and also about the relationship of what you're doing to smartphone apps and new technology developments. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt. I am actually honoured to be here, and I do apologise to Matt and the association. I've basically been locked away for the past 3 years, dealing with the Olympics, dealing with the Mayor's air quality strategy, and also at the same time trying to modernise, in some respects, the services that we've been providing in London. Often voted the best taxi service in the world. We would obviously agree with that, but also possibly one of the most expensive in the world as well. I might be giving a different perspective from a regulator's point of view from everything I've heard so far, but we'll see, and I'm happy to engage in the discussion and debate. And finally, before I start my presentation, just to say how fantastic Washington is. Absolutely beautiful city. Spent some time, went out on the bike scheme yesterday, nearly got run over by a cabbie. I didn't get his number, but you know, absolutely fantastic way to see the city, to get around really quickly. The only thing I was disappointed with is that they didn't have a docking station at the Arlington Cemetery, and I was a bit reluctant to just leave the bike there, worried about, you know, you can't lock it up and stuff like that. But it was really great and a fantastic way to see the city, as I'm sure taxis are as well. So, if you don't know, I thought I'd give a bit of background. We do think we're quite unique in London. We license approximately 1/3 of all the taxis and private hire vehicles. I think that in America, those are traditionally your limousines and your sedan-type vehicles. And we are unique in the United Kingdom because we are one authority, a separate authority. And in many places throughout England and Wales, licensing of taxis and private hire vehicles for hire vehicles, they're actually a subset of other licensing activities. So officers that go out and do regulatory inspections on restaurants or tattoo parlours or liquor licensing, they also have a responsibility for taxi and private hire licensing as well. So we are quite unique in terms of the way we license. We deal with huge volumes of taxis. As I think was mentioned earlier, we've got 20, I think that number's correct, as of as of last week, 25,389 taxi drivers, black cab drivers, driving the traditional, iconically shaped black cab. That's 25,389 CEOs of their own company. They are self-employed. They don't have to be with a fleet operator. They don't have to be with a dispatcher. They can pick and choose and do what they want, and quite often do. We've also got 65,000 private hire operators, private hire drivers, apologies, and around about in total 75,000 vehicles. So very high volumes. About 200,000 taxi journeys every single day. About the same amount in terms of private hire journeys as well. We feel we set standards, very high standards in London, and it does generate significant interest across the world. There's not a week or that tends to go by when we don't have someone, a film crew or a regulator from another part of the country, another part of the world, coming over and seeing what we do. We do have a massive, massive problem at the moment with air quality. We're facing European Union on the verge or brink of fining London 300 million euros for breaching air quality. A lot of the air quality problems that we have in London comes from ground transportation, and a high percentage of that comes from taxis. So actually we're using the regulatory framework that we have to actually try and combat some of those problems, and I'll touch on that during the presentation. Very briefly, this is kind of things we get involved in. Over the past 3 years, it's been very operational, very hands-on. As I said, we do stuff from appointing taxi ranks. We regulate the taxi fares. We don't regulate the private hire fares in any way. Private hire vehicles in London, they can charge whatever they want. Taxis have to charge what's on the meter, but the private hire trade can charge whatever they want in terms of journeys. And over the past 3 years, we haven't had time to be more strategic in thinking about the regulations and the governance and what the future looks like in terms of regulation. And I know we've got Jessica from the Law Commission here today, and she's going to be doing a presentation tomorrow afternoon. I encourage you to listen to how the UK is looking at reforming and regulating taxi licensing and private hire licensing regulations. But I won't dwell on that too much. This is kind of a high-level summary of how it works in London. This, on the left-hand side, best way, taxis, those are the 25,000 black cabs, the only vehicles that comply for hire on street. And on the right-hand side, you've got this mix of private hire vehicles, which are mini cabs. We've got chauffeur and executive cars, special purpose vehicles, often doing very important work out in the suburbs in terms of transportation of disabled people, children, special needs children, schools, those kind of things. Around the outside, this slide has changed in the past 2 years because we used to have just these radio circuits. And so we've had to include now stakeholders. We view them as stakeholders, these taxi app developers, which we do view as stakeholders and do have place a huge level of importance on engaging with them in a proactive way. We've been engaging with app developers since I think 2008, 2009. So very early stages. And as I said, on the right-hand side, most importantly, is private hire vehicles. It's actually illegal for them to have meters in London. So they can actually link to some of these apps and generate the fares if they want to. And it's not illegal. There's nothing stopping them doing that. Black cabs, you can only charge what's on the meter, with the exception of a few booking charges and fees. Meeting London's needs, we have 100% wheelchair accessible taxi fleet. Wheelchairs, side loaded, something we place a huge level of focus on in terms of passenger safety, in terms of accessibility. I was at a recent conference on accessibility, and there was a gentleman in the crowd, and he basically said, my wife would never, ever get in a London black cab. They're death traps, absolute death traps. They're not safe. She's a wheelchair user, she would never, ever use them. And of course, I was asked to respond as the regulator, and they said, would you like to respond to that, Mr. Mason? I said, look, our black cabs, every single one of our black cabs, 25,000, They have to have ramps, they have to have fixtures, the drivers have to go through training as part of their training process. I cannot see one reason why your wife wouldn't use a black cab. And he said, well, I can, she's dead. So you can imagine how I felt, having gone through that process of trying to explain how accessible taxi is, that this gentleman's wife was actually dead. But the point I'm trying to make is every single one of our black cabs is accessible. There are slight differences in terms of wheelchair users, because obviously if you've got somebody disabled who is in a huge, massive wheelchair, you wouldn't be able to sideload that into a black cab. The other most important thing for London is safety, and I'm sure that's something you as regulators also place a high emphasis on. We, in London, every single driver, whether a black cab driver or a private hire driver, has to go through an enhanced CRB check process. That's the same kind of level of check as if you wanted to be a nurse, a policeman, working in security services, and if there's any doubt whatsoever about your background, in terms of convictions, etc., you're out. And of course, we've also got a very high level of enforcement in terms of unlicensed drivers out in street, predominantly at night, not licensed by us, vehicles haven't been inspected, drivers haven't been inspected, and they're out there and they're illegally applying for hire, and clearly that's a big issue for us as well. Street hails then, you know, they present challenges, and I'm sure the challenges in London are probably no different to anywhere else across the world. You've seen this, I saw it last night out in Washington. You know, you see this situation time and time again. There's the person there with the arm outstretched looking for a taxi. In this picture, we've got a taxi, that's great. But how many times have we seen this scenario being played out where the hand's out, there's clearly a demand for a taxi, but the taxi isn't in the place where the passenger wants to be picked up. We've also got inconsistency in London about credit card and debit card payments. It's improved significantly. We don't mandate that drivers have to take credit cards or debit cards. We don't mandate it at all, but we've seen a massive increase now in credit card and debit card acceptance. But it needs to improve even further because our experience is passengers want consistency. I worked during the Olympics, some very high volume sites where I saw people coming out of the Stratford Olympic Stadium. They went to the most important taxi rank that we were operating during the games, and they played this charade of going to the first taxi on the rank. And you could clearly see that they wanted to pay by card, and then they went to the second taxi on the rank and the third taxi on the rank. We need to improve that consistency, and we do actually believe that apps do help with that process. Our approach to apps kind of can be tracked down to the Mayor's air quality strategy, which he launched. We started consultation in that towards the back end of 2009. That introduced age limits, as Matt mentioned. So we now have age limits for taxis. They came in on the first of, it seems quite a long time actually, 15 years. Somebody said we've got 7-year age limit in Washington? 15-year age limit in London. Actually, that is significant. That reduces, I think, by about 3,000 by the end of this year, 3,000 of the most polluting taxis in London as a result of that age limit. And London cabs generally do last 20 to 25 years. They can, you know, they're very durable vehicles. But anyway, the Mayor's strategy. The Mayor said at the time of his air quality strategy that he wanted to support taxi sharing and wanted us, TfL, the regulator that will report to the Mayor, to actually work proactively with electronic hailing. The Mayor and TfL feel that electronic hailing and these types of applications can have significant benefits in reducing emissions. That's why it was included in the Mayor's air quality strategy. It's still got to be proven, but we're seeing some encouraging signs. We've adopted a very hands-off approach. The government in England, they one of their what's the word I'm looking for? One of their ideas to tackle things like the economy and problems facing the economy is cut red tape, cut regulation. You know, if there's a law that already exists, don't invent another law. So there are laws exist for every driver that works in London that they can't use mobile phones while they're driving. So the policy, the government policy in London is you don't invent another law to say taxi drivers, you can't use your phones while driving because there's already a law that exists. Now, of course, if they break that law and they get prosecuted for using their phone under the laws that already exist, then that could call into question their fitness to be licensed going forward. But the approach in London, it's not just my approach, it's the mayor's approach, it's the government's approach. Less red tape, support business and development of business. And what we're seeing now as a result of that is a busy market. I mean, I thought Matt's slide was quite scary. I mean, I just picked out some of the ones that we've dealt with. And actually, over the past 3 years, we've had the guys that have come to us that have been working in their garage or in their bedroom on their computer, and they think that they've invented the next best thing. No one's thought about it. It's going to revolutionise the taxi market. And actually, when you sit down with them, you say, have you heard of Halo? Have you heard of Get Taxi or Uber? And they go, no, we don't even know. Never even thought about it. And we've actually seen lots of apps come to the market and then just go again. And there's various reasons for that. It's not because of regulation. Most of the time it is because they go out, they launch into the market, and they haven't got the drivers to service the public. They haven't got the controls that are necessary in place to make sure that the passenger gets the highest quality of service. And you can see that straight away with the ratings. You know, someone downloads an app off the iTunes store, 5-star ratings, you know, and if people are getting 1-star ratings and 2-star ratings, people are not going to use, the public are not going to use those apps, and that's been our experience today. The two main ones that have established themselves in London are Get Taxi and Halo. The approach that, as I said, that we've adopted is, if they haven't come to us, but both of those two did, then we'll try and go to them. You know, we've seen that you're about to launch this app. You need to come and speak to us. Not because we want to tell you what you can't do, but what we might be able to do to help you. But to be fair to Halo and Get Taxi, they approached us at a very early stage. We want to work with you. We want to talk to you. We want to understand what your concerns are. We want to understand what you think is important. And from that first point, the most important thing to us as a regulator, in our view, was you need to make sure that the people that are signing up to your apps, the drivers that are getting the work, are drivers that we've licensed, that we haven't revoked their license, that they're not rogue drivers. We talk about rogue apps, but there's rogue drivers. And all the apps that have developed and all the apps that are succeeding are those companies that place the same level of emphasis on customer safety, customer satisfaction that we do. And what we do is we help out. We don't stand in the way, we don't try and overcomplicate matters. And what we are finding is the ones that are successful, the ones that place that emphasis on quality and customer service are succeeding. The other ones are fading away. And as they come to market, I'm sure more will come to market and may do also be very successful. You know, we're now seeing that between all the apps that are out there, we estimate that of the 25,000 CEOs of their own company, around 10,000 are now regularly using apps. And that figure seems to be growing on a daily basis. We're seeing a good thing. We're seeing a reduction in the cost. It costs us to process lost property. Because what the apps do is they provide a quicker, much more convenient way of putting the passenger back with a lost item. Because they've made that connection. The passenger's made the connection with the driver. We're seeing a reduction in complaints that we get directly from passengers. Because if a passenger has a bad experience and they rate one of these apps as 1 star out of 5, the app developers that are very focused on customer care, they're getting proactively, getting onto that customer, sitting down with the customer. What went wrong? What did we do? And they're dealing with the complaint. So I'm seeing less complaints as a regulator coming to me. We're seeing massive increased consistency in credit card and debit card acceptance. And we haven't got a lot of data for it at the moment, but we are going to try and get some. But we believe that these apps are putting the driver and the passenger much quicker together, reducing dead mileage, reducing the amount of drivers that are in ranks and on ranks at mainline stations. And that's wherever we've got massive ranks in London, we've got massive mission problems. And so we're going to look at the data and see if that's really working. And the world hasn't stopped turning. You know, we were worried about it. You know, we was thinking, you know, there's going to be crashes on the street, and there's people out there that think, you know, they're quite nervous about this, that, you know, disabled passengers are going to be upset, and the radio circuits, the traditional radio circuits that we have in London aren't going to like it. And to be fair to them, you know, a year ago they were saying, oh, it's not going to last. And each three of the main radio circuits that traditionally take bookings by phone, rather than get on to us and say, you need to be stopping these apps, they've actually come out and we're going to develop our own app. They've given in. They just want to launch their own apps now. And our experience is that it's working. That there isn't this, you know, massive call for regulation in London. There isn't this massive call for additional restrictive powers. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing problems with drivers crashing because they're using their phones. And passengers are really embracing it. You know, I speak from my own experience. I get more cabs now using the apps than I've ever done before. It's frightening because Transport for London and the Mayor don't pay my cab fares. So I have to pay my own cab fares. And at the end of every month, I get my statement and I think, oh my God, how much have I spent? Because it takes a decision out of my, you know, a year ago, if I wanted a cab, I needed to make sure I had 30 or 40 pounds in my pocket. And if I didn't have 30 or 40 pounds in my pocket, I used to have to go and wait and queue up at the ATM or ask the driver to stop and queue at the ATM. And the driver, often when we stopped at the ATM, would then get a parking ticket from my former colleagues in the parking enforcement. That's starting to reduce. I get more cabs now because I don't need to. I've got my credit card and debit cards lodged. They're all compliant with the legal regulations that govern credit card and debit card acceptance. And that can't just be me. That's not just happening with me. That's happening with passengers across London. As I said before, we're seeing reductions in complaints. We're seeing reductions in lost property, processing time, and really seeing the positive impacts on that. What we would say is early engagement is absolutely essential. Whether you end up with regulation in the States, I don't know. That's entirely down to you. Our view was that we didn't need to do it, and to date, we haven't seen any real need to go down that route. And as I said, final point, validation of driver processes is absolutely vitally important. I think that was it. It was. And I'll take questions later when we have a panel discussion. I hope you found that interesting.